Hello, I'm Amy Shulke of Vanilla Arts Company, and today we're coloring smooth and natural skin using my Copic face shaping technique. My Huckleberry was a beginner level project that was originally developed for a local Copic class in Macomb, Michigan. The full project took me an hour and a half to color. Today, we're going to be focusing on just the skin portion of my Huckleberry. I get lots of requests to cover my skin and hair techniques, so while I could condense the whole Huckleberry project footage down to like a 15-minute speed color, I think it's going to be much more valuable to you if we just look at the skin methods in real time. If you want to color the full project, there's a printable supply list available at the link in the description below. You can also find work-in-progress photos, plus helpful tips in my Instagram feed, which is also listed in the description. The stamp I'm using today is Fishing Squidgy by StampingBella. For class, we stamped the boy onto a half sheet of Holt's Perfect coloring paper using Memento's London Fog, but what you're seeing in the video here has been slightly enlarged for the purposes of demonstration. But everything you see here can be done on the original stamp size, and I use the same basic face sculpting technique on stamps of all sizes. My whole approach is based on techniques that I learned in portraiture and anatomy illustration classes. Before we start, please be sure to like this video and hit the subscribe button. Your support tells me to keep making more coloring videos. Are you ready? Let's color a face. But first, let's stop to think what we're coloring here. Because too many people just grab a marker and start slapping down color without understanding where the color needs to go and why. If I asked you to shape this face, you would likely add some shade to the outer side of each cheek to make the face a little more rounded, right? And then you'd start shading right where the bangs hang down over the forehead. But what most colorers miss is that no matter how cartoonish the stamp is, underneath all of that skin and all of that hair, our Huckleberry boy here has a skull. And that skull has unique shapes that give form to his face. Now with a cartoon image, you don't have to include all of the little details. But the more accurate shapes that you acknowledge, the more character and the more relatability you add to the face. For me, I choose to focus on the eyes. Now, if you flatten out your hand and put your palm up to your face, you're going to hit the tip of your nose, right? Try it out. Flat palm, put it up against your face. You feel the nose first because on humans, that nose protrudes out farther than any other facial feature. If you were to go a little deeper, your palm would touch your lips. Deeper still, and we get to the chin. And then we would touch the forehead. Then you'd feel the eyebrows and the cheekbones. Have you noticed that we still haven't felt any eyeballs yet? That's because the eyes sit deep into eye sockets. I know you know this, but have you ever considered what those eye sockets do to the faces that you color? Just because the face has been drawn round doesn't mean that you have to color it like a basketball. I'm starting with Copic B60 here, and I'm looking for those eye sockets. Right at the bottom of the eyeball, you're going to have a junction between the eye socket and his cheekbone. So see, I've drawn that line across there, and then I'm gently flicking up from that line, and he's going to start to look like a raccoon. But that's good because that means he has eye sockets. Now I'm coming up here and adding just a little bit of this blue shading color to push the forehead back behind the bangs. And this ear over here is deep. It's sitting back behind some hair. And then this ear has a little bit of a recessed area to it, and that gets a bit of the B60 as well. It looks a little strange, but I'm starting to think through the anatomy, and that's what I want you to do too with your coloring. All right, here's E21, and all I'm doing here is going over the top of the B60 and slightly beyond. This gives me that muddy, dirty color It's the color of the bags under your eyes when you stay out too late the night before. That's the color of natural skin shading. So here I am just going over the top of the B60. I'm coming down here with that eye socket, separating the eye socket from the cheekbone. I'm going to flick up a little bit into the hairline there, just so that the hair doesn't look blocky and chunky when I eventually put that in. There's that deep ear, going over the top of the B60, turning it from blue shade into that dirty, shady skin color. This whole ear back there. Ears are not connected to your cheek, they're connected to the side of your head. They sit back there deeply. Now I'm doing a lighter shade color. This is just E21 on the sides of the cheek, and I'm flicking inward towards the nose so that now we're finally starting to round the skull out properly. But it's not basketball shaped because we've got those eye sockets in there. Later on, we will come in with some colored pencils and give even more depth to the face. For now though, we're going to finish the Copic process. So this is E50. It's going over the top of the B60. It's going over the top of the E21. I'm getting everything nice and moist so that when I get ready to blend this face, those darker colors are already primed to start blending. So I've given them a coat of that E50, getting them wet, letting those darker colors know that, hey dude, we're about to start blending. Over the top of that E21, flicking out slightly beyond, just getting it moist here. Now you'll notice I slow down. I slowed down there and I'm kind of pressing my nib into the paper a little bit. And that's going to give me a juicier application. All right, so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, not quite blended as well as I wanted to. So this is attempt number 2. I'm just going in there and refreshing these areas with a bit of the E50. You saw how I was pressing that nib down, but now watch. I'm waiting for that ink to blend itself out. Too many colorers think that it's the friction of your marker that makes that blend. No, it's blending right here while we're waiting on camera right now. It's getting smoother and I'm not touching it. If you keep scrubbing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you're doing two things. You're over inking your paper and you're making the skin darker than it really should be, because one coat of E50 looks like E50, but 3 coats of E50 starts to look more like E51 or 52. You're darkening the skin by overstroking your paper. Okay, so remember when we put our palm to our face? You know what you never touched? You didn't touch your neck because your neck sits way back behind the chin. So the neck gets a complete coat of that B60. We're darkening the neck and that's pushing it way back behind the chin. And this is E21 going over the top of it, just making it smooth. See, look, we've already got some different dimensions, different levels going on here. The neck is deep and the chin is closer. Now let's work on those hands. So if you make a little fist, you'll see that your fingers overlap your palm, and that's why I'm putting some B60 there. Down here in the armpit, the arm is tucking up underneath the shirt. That gets a little bit of B60 as well. Here comes that E21, same colors that I used on the face. Skin is skin, it's skin everywhere. So here's that E21 going over the top of the B60 and slightly beyond. I'm going to darken that thumb. It's not as dark as the palm because the palm had the B60 there, but that thumb still needs to sit back behind the fishing pole. Now we're darkening the upper arm area, right where it dips underneath the shirt. There we go, just a little bit of color down at the bottom, and now we're going to come in with that blending color, the E50. The 50 is going over the top of the B60. It's going over the top of the E21. I'm doing a slower, more leisurely stroke. I'm pressing that nib into the paper and really getting some ink in there to saturate the paper. Here's E21 right on the ends of those knuckles, and this is going to make those fingers look as if they're slightly rounded. It's a small area. I don't expect you to try and get 3 markers into that spot. So notice I'm kind of slowing down, I'm watching my paper, I'm not stroking that arm with the blending color. I'm going to wait for the Copic fairy to come and blend it out for me. In the meantime, let's do the same exact process to the opposite arm. Where those fingers overlap the palm, we darken the palm with the B60. Where the arm tucks into the shirt sleeve, that gets a little bit of B60 as well. Here comes the E21, going over the top of the blue and slightly beyond. So I'm still using that flick stroke. You saw me build like a little fence because I don't want to accidentally flick into the shirt. I want to keep my strokes nice and neat. Darken that thumb, and then I'm going to come along and gently pick out the area of the palm there. Don't want to get those fingers dark. And now I'm going to start flicking towards the body. There we go. All of that blue has been completely covered. The average viewer won't even know it's there. They only register that as shade. There's the blending color. You saw that my stroke was slower and I pressed in further. I'm really making that the juiciest of my 3 different colors. A little bit of that E21 on the outside edge of those knuckles, just giving a little bit of shape to those fingers. And then I'll blend it out with the E50. I'm way up on the tip here because those areas are really small, but they still need the color. There we go. And now I'm going to let the Copic Fairy blend it out. If I look at that first arm and it looks like it needs some blending, I can go back at this point and fix it. Here's that B60 on the outside of the foot. And we'll do both feet at the same time, same exact process. Just flicking in a little bit where the foot tucks up underneath the pant leg. And, it kind of gives that impression that we're looking back in towards the ankle. Okay, so now I'm going to go right over the top of that blue, and I'm going to try to come along on the tops of the toes. So I'm going to flick in from both sides. That rounds the top of the foot off, and then here we go, right over the tops of the toes. Just adding a few little lines there, and then I'm going to add a little bit of color to the bottom of the toes. This is a foreshortened foot. That's the technical term. That foot is coming out toward your viewers. So those toes need to be light and bright so that they look like they're closer to us. Here's that E50 going over each one of the toes, and now I'm up on the top of the foot, slowly blending that color out with the E50. Same thing, other foot. Back with the E21, darkening in over the big toe, darkening the foot right where it tucks up under the pant leg. Now I'm covering over that blue where the super shade is on that side. And now I'm going to go right over the top of the toe. I'm not coloring the toe, I'm coloring the skin right behind the toe. And now just the underside of these toes. Then I'll come in with the E50 using a slower stroke, a juicier stroke. I'm going to do each one of those little toes, getting them nice and wet. And then I'll slowly go over the top of the foot, blending that out. Okay, we got a little time jump there because remember, we're just working on skin today and the facial features. I am using a dark gray Triplus. I'm just tracing over the stamp lines for the eyes, and then here is kind of a sepia color, and I'm doing the freckles here. And now let's move to those colored pencils. Remember those raccoon eyes that we gave him originally with the B60 Copic? Now we're reestablishing, some of that B60 got washed away. I'm popping some of that back in with grayed lavender Prismacolor. This is Prismacolor number 1026, and I'm just softly putting those little raccoon eyes right back in, and it's immediately going to pop those cheeks forward and give him more of a smiley expression. Remember some of that shade that was up there where the bangs hang down over the forehead? I'm not pressing very hard, folks. You can hardly see the changes that I'm making on camera, and that's because I'm using almost no pencil pressure here with the colored pencil. You don't need a lot to get the job done. That ear over there is a little darker. I also want to make sure the ear doesn't look like a disc, so I'm adding in the recessed folds inside that ear with a little bit of light umber pencil. So there's each of those little folds, and then I'm going to fill that in with a little bit of that grayed lavender. I know it seems strange to put purple and blue on skin, but I get these colors just from looking at other people's skin, looking at the shade, looking at the shadow, and deciding what colors do I see there. I see a lot of blues and purples there. I'm darkening the back side of the cheek there, and this is going to help to round that face out a bit. Get a little bit of extra shade over on this side because the hair comes down on that side. Grayed lavender, it's my best friend when I'm doing portraits. Let's put a little bit on the sides of the neck. It's a small area, but it still deserves our attention. And now I'm going to go just under the nose, ever so gently. We're pushing kind of that mustache area back, and it's going to make the nose pop out just a little bit. We don't want a big nose on this image, but we do want that nose to feel like it's sticking out a little bit. I've got a little grayed lavender right on either side of the smile line, and that's going to pop his upper lip forward and push the lower lip back just ever so slightly. One of the big mistakes that I see with colorers is they choose colors that are too bright and too pretty to actually reflect the type of skin tones that we see in real life. So instead of using a bright pink like blush pink, I'm using Prismacolor Nectar, which is 1092. And if you hold this pencil up, it almost exactly matches your lips with no lipstick on that. It looks really good on men, on boys, and on young children when the makeup look, when the cosmetic look is just totally inappropriate. This is a little bit of indigo blue, and I use this as a super push. See how I was pushing those eye sockets just a little bit deeper? And now I'm coming in and I'm tempering that indigo blue with just a little bit more grayed lavender over the top of it. The grayed lavender warms it up slightly, so the blue is there for like the super deep shadow, and then the grayed lavender warms it and makes it feel a little bit more like a skin tone. Darkening those ears a little bit. Sometimes you have to come back and make adjustments, and you only see that those adjustments are necessary when you start to get the other colors in there. I almost never do the colored pencil parts until I have the hair in, because the hair is so much darker than the face. You won't be able to read the skin tones properly until you have the dark colors in and in place and up against that skin so that you can compare the dark hair with the light skin. That was just a little bit of light umber there. I'm just kind of finessing those eye sockets. Remember, I told you I spend a lot of time. I paid really good attention to those eye sockets, trying to get them to feel nice and deep and recessed. Now that we have the face better developed, we need to treat the rest of the skin almost as detailed as we do the face. So this is that grayed lavender, and I'm looking for those areas where we originally put in some B60. And I'm just very softly, very gently deepening some of the darkest areas. So like right up close to the fingers in the palm there. See how that pushes the palm farther away from the viewer? It darkens the palm slightly, and that makes those fingers look as if they're closer to us. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the toes. So you'll see me go right over the top of the toes, and it's going to push the foot back and separate the toes from the foot. Because remember, that foreshortened foot, there's going to be a lot of darker color towards the top of that foot. Just kind of coming in and carving out those toes, making sure that they're separate from the rest of the foot. From here on out, I'm just finessing the foot. I'm not really adding anything new, I'm just making sure that it's nice and soft and that each one of those toes are nice and distinct from each other. Just a little bit of grayed lavender at the bottom of those toes. Doesn't need much, and I'm not pressing hard, but the effect is really cool. And there you go. He's a cute little cartoon kid, but he has a lifelike face, largely because we've paid attention to the various levels of his face. The nose sticks out farther than the upper lip. The eyes sit back and recessed behind the cheekbones. The ears, they're coming off the side of his head, and that's quite a bit deeper than his cheeks. And the neck, that neck is super deep compared to the rest of the face. That's my face sculpting technique for cartoon faces. It's a lot of fun, but it also looks pretty darned cool. Be sure to download the entire project supply list so that you can color this whole fishing squidgy too. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to color again with you soon.